What's up, everyone? My name is Jonathan here at the Venue RX, and on this show, we are passionate about documenting and sharing best practices for owning, operating, managing, building, running, right? The world's best wedding venues. And I'm excited about the topic we are going to be discussing today because it is one that is really the meat and potatoes, I would say, of running your venue. And it's one of the things that I think venue owners specifically think about quickest, as you're calculating and even doing some back of the napkin, calculations for, okay, how much is this going to cost and how much is this going to make me? And so we are going to be talking about pricing, and we're going to be talking about sales. And, this is such a lifeblood piece of all of our businesses. And I know that as we start, going through the building process and the permitting process and wherever we're at in that building process, if you are brand new to this space, or if you are an existing venue owner, and you have this whole thing already built, but you want to reevaluate, you want to understand, where am I at in the market currently? This topic is going to be for you. And so I am really pumped to have Sam Jacobson from Ideaction Consulting with me here today. Sam, thank you so much for joining the show.
Yeah, happy to be here, Jonathan.
You're listening to the Venue RX podcast.
Well, as I dove through your website, there is so much incredible content there. I mean, you guys do copywriting and consulting and coaching and so much different stuff. And we're going to have the links to that in the descriptions everywhere that this is going to be posted. But could you give me a little bit of an origin story as to how you got started in this? And I mean, you mentioned some stuff right even before we got started that I was kicking myself for not having the recording going, but how did you get into this industry?
I think like most people, I kind of fell into it. I think you and I share a restaurant background. Yep. And, I got into, my first job was at the Water Wheel restaurant in Holiday Inn, Portland South off the freeway near a truck stop. I was a busboy and room server at the age of 16. And I would go to work and make $30-$40. And at the time it was big money, paid for my gas, paid for dates with my girlfriend. And then I eventually started waiting tables, and I worked through fabulous restaurants like the Olive Garden, and I made my way further north onto San Juan Island. I had gone up there as a recent graduate of college and wanted to make some money at this resort that catered to wealthy yacht owners. And I ended up coming back there a couple years later, but I went in as a restaurant manager. Fast forward 3 years, and the GM of the property comes in and says, "Hey, Sam, guess what? You're our new event manager." And I said, "What do you mean, Brent?" And he said, "Well, the previous event manager had to leave on short notice for a family emergency, and we need somebody to jump in and run the day-to-day." And I said, "Great, when do I start?" He said, "Right now. You've got a ceremony rehearsal in 2 hours. Get ready." So It was baptism by fire. And that was in 2006. I'm telling you, I got in there and I was like, this is way better than restaurants. There's so much more going on. It's so much more creative, and there's so much more opportunity for me to learn. So I ended up working at that property for 8 years. It's always connected to the venue. I eventually got promoted to lodging director later that year. And I sold and or operated the venue for this property for the duration of those 8 years. And after that, I decided I needed a bigger challenge. So I went to one of the biggest planning design decor companies in Texas, and I worked as a director of operations for Todd Events at that outfit. And then eventually I decided I need even bigger challenge, and I wanted to help more people, not just one boss at a time, but a lot of bosses. So I opened up Ideaction Consulting so that I could work with solopreneurs, venue owners, hospitality operations to help make them more money and make their jobs more enjoyable.
That is an incredible amount of experience. And I love that you started in the restaurant space, because that is, like you said, we do share that. And that's a space that's near and dear to my heart. I mean, I think you learn a lot very quickly about customer service and about reading tables and situational awareness and things like that, that you can definitely apply over to events. But speaking on the events and the venue side specifically, I mean, we're a podcast all focused towards venue owners, focused towards venue operators. Have you actually sold weddings yourself? Are you, it sounds like you were involved in running them. You were the director of operations. Were you in sales for a great period of that time as well? What's your experience there?
Yeah, so I am one of the rare business coaches, at least that I know of in the wedding industry, that's actually sold directly to couples. And so I sold at the venue from 2006 until 2014. So 8 years altogether. We were a pretty unique hybrid of high volume but also premium buyer. And so we serviced largely wealthy boat owners, but also we were a premier destination in the Northwest. So I worked directly with couples. I would do everything from field the inquiries to pre-qualify, to do site tours and go through and close the deal. I've also operated as the service manager to do in-house catering and ensure that the banquets go according to plan. So everything related to venue, in-house catering, selling, marketing, operating, I've done it for 8 years.
That's huge. And now as a consultant, as someone who's coming in and kind of helping people get their businesses tuned up, I'm curious, have you seen a shift in the time that you've been in the industry on how couples are inquiring and your process for pre-qualifying couples?
There's a lot more work that's done online ahead of time. That's really been the change over the last 16 years. It used to be that people, would inquire. Yes, there were phones, not quite as old as faxes, but there were a lot of phone calls still back then. But there were still a lot of emails. I think what's changed since, say, 2006 and 2022 is that there's a lot more work done ahead of the initial inquiry on behalf of the couple. And so the couple is doing a lot of window shopping before they actually reach out, and certainly before they're willing to take the time to make a visit. Everybody who's getting married today is super busy, and they don't have time to just go and tour around all the different venues that they see online. Instead, what they're doing is they're doing a lot more research. They're looking at websites ahead of time, and they're trying to get a better understanding of what they're getting into before they actually take the risk of making a phone call or at least getting on the phone or making a site visit. So websites are hugely important. That's one of the reasons why 3 years ago we shifted, knowing that we want to book more business for our clients, from just doing sales and pricing discussion to actually doing the copywriting, because so much work was being done on the website to book business rather than in person or over the phone.
Well, and I love that you brought that up, because I was going to ask, my next question was, what do you feel like as you work with business owners, what do you feel like competitive advantages are for, let's say you're working with two different venue owners side by side. What are some competitive advantages that you see now with these shifts in the market, where now people do come with a lot of information? It's almost like the car industry. Like you said that, and I immediately thought of now people are on their phones, they kind of know a rough estimate of the pricing. There's all these other options other than just kind of the traditional dealership model. What are some competitive advantages that venue owners can, in a general way, position themselves to more accurately serve this more well-educated buyer?
Yeah, so the first thing is dump your better product strategy. And by that, I mean, you have to get out of the mindset that you're selling a venue. My wife and business partner, Katie, she worked at Four Seasons for 14 years as a director of catering, and 8 years before that for various luxury properties. So between the two of us, we had literally 3 decades of sales experience at weddings, at wedding venues. And I remember we used to talk early on about how venue owners make a general mistake of thinking that they're selling 4 walls, a floor, and a ceiling. That's not what you're selling. What you're selling is an opportunity for the families to come together and to celebrate traditions and to form new ones and to create memories they can look back on for a lifetime. So as soon as you get away as a venue owner of thinking that you're selling a space and that it's all about dates, rates, and spaces, if you get out of that mindset and start connecting with the couple, what they want and need most, and then tailor what it is that you're messaging to them around that, that is going to be the biggest competitive advantage that you can have.
That's powerful. That's really powerful. How do you feel like a sales team? Because I think a lot of owner operators might be listening to this and might, I guess, sell their venue with that passion, because they understand that they are really selling this experience, and they're going to be boots on the ground, making sure that they deliver the best experience possible. But what happens when you start getting into a situation where you have a sales team, maybe even you have multiple venue locations, and now you have to inspire a sales team to sell more than just a product, like you were saying?
Yeah, I think the key is to imagine dumping the brochure that you have. And I know you venue owners have a ton of PDFs. First things first, you got to get rid of that stuff. Put it on your website. If you're sharing the same information over and over again, especially as you get later into the buying journey, emails and whatnot, you should probably have all of that pamphlet brochure type information online, accessible, ready for the couple to read at any point. And also for the people who are probably bankrolling the wedding, the parents or whomever it may be. So it's really important to get out of the mindset that you are, sharing product information, and instead focus your time in the sales process on discovering what it is that your clients or potential clients want and need the most. So get out of the mindset of talking at people and instead try to listen the information that you need out of them so you can then present the right information at the right time during the buying process.
That's huge. Do you feel like so you said putting all that stuff online, like all the PDFs and all that stuff. I'm assuming based on that statement that you're a proponent of putting your pricing on your website?
A little bit, yes, a little bit. So
walk me through that a little bit.
Yeah. So first of all, you always, whenever you're doing anything in business, you want to start with the end in mind. What's the goal? And eventually you get down to what your goal is. I find that there's typically two goals that a wedding business owner has, venue or otherwise. They either want to book more clients or they want to book better clients. Obviously, the holy grail is to book more better clients, but typically you're either trying to fill your calendar with as many dates as possible, or you are already full with the number of dates that you can fill on your calendar with your venue. And so now you're trying to increase your price. And so as you're going through and you're thinking about any kind of pricing strategy or pricing structure, you want to begin with that end in mind. Are we trying to sell more dates? Are we trying to sell a higher volume of dates? Or are we trying to sell each date for a higher price point? And so you're going to have a different strategy depending on what you're hoping for, different strategy for your website. Let's take the first one. So if you want to have more dates filled, you want to have less pricing information up front. Because as a general rule, the more people that you correspond with and Zoom with and tour with, the more people you are going to book if you are anything close to a reasonably decent salesperson. So more opportunities to talk with people is going to equal more conversions. But that doesn't work if you're doing a high number of dates already. If you're trying to pre-qualify and to screen out price shoppers or people who may not be able to afford you if you're on the higher end of your market spectrum, then what you're going to try and do is put more pricing information up front. And so different strategies will get you different outcomes. I would recommend that most people put their starting at price on the website. And I recommend that because you don't want to waste your time and you don't want to waste their time with numbers that don't work in the very beginning. So, if you're, and I'm sure we'll get into dynamic pricing, but if we start talking about how to price your venue, you're going to look at what is, a good number that you feel confident putting out there that says, look, to get your foot in the door with our business, you're going to have to spend X dollars. That number should go on your website, typically on your services page. If you're still getting a bunch of people who are inquiring that are not qualified to pay that amount of money, then you want to put it on your contact page, not in your contact form, but on your contact page. And then the next step would be to put it in your inquiry response and say, hey, glad you reached out, super excited to talk to you. Please be aware that we typically work with clients who spend X number of dollars and above. So those are three different places you can put it in the buyer's journey, from services page to contact page to inquiry response.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you feel like there has been a shift at all in the information that the buyer is aware of as far as pricing goes? The difference being between the blank canvas type of venues that are just selling space access or the all-inclusive venues? And I'm asking this almost more of a selfish question because I know we operate primarily blank canvas venues, and so there might be a pricing question in an inquiry form, or we might talk about that, and some people come along and they're just like, $40,000, let's say. They're not saying, we're like, okay, we understand, like we know because we're professionals in this industry, we know they're talking about the whole entire kit and caboodle for their wedding, right? But what do you see as far as people coming in and being aware of what number they're looking at and how that relates to what they feel like they're getting, whether it's a all-inclusive or just a blank canvas and kind of a starting point?
So I want to talk about two things: absolute value versus relative value, and then also different stages of awareness. And I'm glad you used the word aware because I'm going to come back to that. So first off, there's no absolute price for anything. It's only relative to what they see elsewhere and compare and value elsewhere. So, I've got this microphone in front of me. Like if I tell you, hey, how much did you pay for this, Jonathan? Well, it's hard for you to know without taking the product features and comparing it to another product that has similar or dissimilar features, and you associate value based on the benefits you receive from those features to then come up with a price that equals the value proposition that you're willing to pay for, right? Like that's in a nutshell how it is that people are doing this decision making. And so when you go through and you think about,
and let me just interject there. So that's interesting though, because when I see that microphone, I know, because I have a little bit of a background with microphones and I did some product reviews and things like that. That's a Yeti, and you probably have the black. Is that the black edition?
Correct.
Yeah, so that's probably around $300. It's in the $350 range.
Something like that.
Something around there.
Something like that.
So, but yeah. I might know that because, and that's probably not exact, maybe I got that wrong, but I might know that because I have some contextual information. And so I'm curious if you find the buyer is now, since the buyer is more aware, that they now have the contextual information to have a more accurate understanding of what it's going to cost them, versus maybe back in the day when they didn't have all that information. They had to go tour a bunch of different places, and it was maybe harder to get that awareness of what the kind of baseline cost was going to be.
So I think that there's really not much difference in how much people know when they first start out versus after learning a little bit by looking at some pricing guides or proposals. Whether it was 15 years ago or 15 days ago, humans still go through the same decision-making process, the same buyer's journey. And this is the second thing that I wanted to talk about. And this goes back to a guy named Eugene Schwartz, who wrote about the 5 stages of awareness in a book called Breakthrough Advertising, which is taught to anybody who's going through marketing programs. You have these 5 main stages of awareness: unaware, problem aware, solution aware, product aware, and most aware. And what you as a marketer or a salesperson are trying to do are to move people from one stage of awareness to the next. There's a little bit of work on the level of intent to purchase that you want to do, but basically what you're trying to do at every interaction is to identify where are they in the buyer's journey? What stage of awareness are they at? How much intent to purchase do they have? And then you are taking information and you are distilling it and directing it to that buyer at that moment in time with that understanding of whatever it is that you do. So in the very early stages of an inquiry, the very first thing that you're trying to do is to determine what stage of awareness are they in. Are they completely unaware? Do they not have any idea what it is they're looking for in a venue? Do they not even know what they need? Probably that's where all people start. Then eventually they're going to go through and they're going to think, okay, what kind of needs do I have in a venue? Do we need, indoor or outdoor or both? Do we need in-house catering? Do we need service? Do we have a low budget? And so do we need to, kind of BYOB, the beverage? Like they're figuring out what do we need? And that's a little bit of a learning situation because they don't know what they don't know. So they inquire, they find out what they don't know, and now they know. And then they do that over and over and over again. Where you're at in that process, who knows? You could be on the front end where they know nothing, or you could be on the back end where they start to know much more. Maybe they've never even toured a property, or maybe they've toured 15. What your job is as a salesperson is to identify where are they at in the buyer's journey so that you can then target information to them. You know what this is because you're what's called product aware, right? But before you ever looked at mics, you didn't know what the difference was between this mic and a podcast mic and a lapel mic and some other mic. And so as you get in and you learn more, you move from problem aware to here are the different solutions that are out there. And then you're actually comparing the products and the features of the products side by side so that you can distinguish which one is going to meet your needs and how much is that worth to you.
Do you feel like it's shortened, like the amount of time? Because before it might be the time to become product aware took a little bit longer, and now it's a little bit quicker because they can fill out all the inquiries and all the information comes back. And so now you get that. So now people are just going from looking at 5 venues to now they quickly narrow down their top 2. Are you seeing that buyer behavior?
I think that people in general, and venues are just as guilty of this as any other wedding pro, don't put the right kind of information on their website. And so, the difference between what happened 10 years ago and 10 days ago is really about technological advance, right? And so I think in some ways, things like social media have made people more excited, but less understanding of what it is that they're doing. And so, they see a beautiful photo, they watch a film, whatever it may be, and they're like, oh, wow, I want to inquire in that place. And they DM. They don't even give any thought to researching what it is that they're looking at. They're just like, how much does it cost and are you available? And those are just really low aware buyers. But the more information you have for somebody who is really unaware or problem aware, specifically as a venue owner, because you're so far upstream in the decision making of all things wedding at that point, you really want to target information for them that's going to touch on that unaware and problem aware need that they have. I think what most venue owners do is they put a bunch of product information on there. Here are the menus that we serve. Here are the layouts that we have. Here's a bullet point list of all of the rentals that we include. Those guys aren't ready for that yet. They're just trying to figure out, do you host non-denominational religious ceremonies at your venue? Do you have a backup plan because the dates you're looking for in the spring when it rains a lot? And so if you can instead help through your website, social media, blog, newsletter, whatever it is that you do, that early stage marketing, top of funnel information that you're sharing should really be targeting at helping people identify what they want and need from a venue. If you're doing that, you're going to move people through that process faster. But if you start giving people product information, specific pricing information, lists of rental equipment that you include, that all means nothing because it doesn't fill a hole that they've yet identified in their needs list.
Wow, that's super, super powerful. I'm going to be going back and listening to this again because I need to unpack that even for what we do. I feel like we do send out a lot of that information, and that's totally huge. You talked about social media. What place does social media take in this whole sales process? How do you see it being effective as a tool for salespeople at venues?
So I look at social media as a really effective tool in two different parts of the buyer's journey, early stage and late stage. So early stage is great so that they can get an understanding of, what it is that goes on at your event, the kinds of people that they work with. When people are unaware of what they want and need, they look to others to see what it is that they want to need. So one of the things that we do as a company that I am interested and curious about is behavioral science. I'm actually enrolled in a behavioral economics program at Texas A&M University. It's really the intersection of business and marketing and sales, pricing and psychology. And so one of the things that we know is that people want to follow what other people do. It's called the herd effect, social proof. And so if you can use your social media to showcase the kinds of events, the people that you work with, the theme, look, vibe, decor, whatever it is that you've got going, the kinds of experiences, and people who don't know what they want, they know what they don't want, and they know what they've seen elsewhere that they want to replicate. So if you can use, some of your social media to create I want that, that's how you move people from, I don't know what I want to, I want what they want. And when they get to the I want what they want stage, they then become curious about what you do to help make that happen. That's the top of funnel, early stage social media strategy. On the back end, you want to look at how can you provide value and reassurance. So we know through Neil Rackham's studies 3 decades ago that are still holding true today, complex decision-making process goes something like this. You want to start in the early stage by identifying needs. In the middle stage, you want to focus on talking about your services to meet those needs. And at the end, the number one criteria for whether somebody moves forward in a complex sales transaction is how much risk do they assume by making the decision to go with you. A very close second is value, not price, but value. How much value will they get? And so what you're really doing at the end through your social media strategy is you're providing what are called risk reversers. So things like social proof through testimonials, you could do, some sort of quote. You could do even better, like somebody talking to a camera, talking about how great their experience was on Instagram stories. Like sharing that stuff is amazing. You could have planners on and talk about how great you are to work with, or photographers talk about how beautiful your venue is during spring or fall, whatever shoulder season you want to book. You can also go through and you can provide some behind the scenes to show what it is that you do. and break down as much as possible, almost kind of pull it apart to show with every nuance how much value you provide. What are the things that you do differently and better than other people, or at least differently and better, and show them better what on your Instagram story? So that could be the time and care and attention to detail, or that could be how you are white glove service or concierge level experience, or whatever it is that you want to do to create that value so that people understand what's happening. You can also do one more thing, and that is to create scarcity. And this is a really helpful, but also could be dangerous sales technique, which is to use scarcity, the idea that something is rare is either desirable or more expensive. And so if you can start talking about how dates are filling in fast, or like you're doing all of these tours and like, holy cow, we just filled in 5 dates. It's so great to see spring filling up. You're going to create that urge, that desire to make the next step and get off of status quo.
Got it. That makes total sense. I want to go back to what you said about the kind of before and after, or the 2 phases that you felt like the social media. There was something that was interesting to me in there. One was to kind of show them what other people are enjoying, right? And get them curious about that, and you kind of like how, like some curiosity maybe. And then the other portion was allaying any fears that may come as soon as they've gotten past that first step of saying, wow, this is so cool that someone else is enjoying this. I know I want that. But whatever is coming after that, but what if this, but what about that, and all those different things. Is there a cadence that you feel like people should have when showcasing this on their Instagram? Is it like one post on one side, one post on the other side, just back and forth flip-flopping, or is there some method that you've seen work really well?
Well, I think it depends on what you're trying to do at the time. Again, begin with the end in mind and then work backwards. And so, like, let's say you wanted to book fall weddings and you haven't had any inquiries for fall. And so what do you want to do? You want to gin up some fall business. And so you're going to look at early stage, top of funnel, and you're going to look at featuring fall weddings. If that's your goal, to generate more interest, once you get interest and your pipeline starts to fill up in the front, you could then switch your strategy, your social media strategy, to maybe focusing on a different time of the year that you want filled in. And you can also focus on late stage decision-making needs that are more social proof driven or scarcity driven or value building driven. Every sales team wants to maintain a balanced pipeline where you have, roughly the same number or the same volume of interest in your early stage, your middle stage, and your late stage. One of the things that I often see happen with venues is that they focus too much on the thing that's right in front of them. It could be all the inquiries that they get, and then they follow through those inquiries to site tours, and then they spend all their time trying to figure out, how can I close these deals? But they're ignoring developing new people to come into the pipeline that they'll want to work with in the next 2 to 4 weeks. So I think that mixing up a social media strategy or any kind of marketing strategy is going to be the most helpful way so that you maintain that balanced pipeline.
We've talked a couple of times, or a couple of different points here about pricing, and you mentioned dynamic pricing. I'm curious, I didn't hear you immediately say anything like, well, look who's in your market, and kind of, be somewhere in between there. And I think maybe that's some place that venue owners or people who are hopeful venue owners go to. They say, okay, what are the 6 surrounding properties doing? How close am I going to be to those? Let me kind of be somewhere in the middle so that I can be competitive. What is your mentality around pricing? Like, how should a new venue specifically create the pricing that they are either showcasing on their website or providing that starting line that you were mentioning earlier as they began the sales process?
So I'll start by saying there are lots of different ways to do pricing. There are a ton of different strategies. Again, begin with what you want to see accomplished, and then you can work backwards. There are a couple of different pricing strategies that I typically see. One is going to be a penetration pricing strategy, which is somebody who's new on the market. You're going to want to penetrate the market. You want to get a foothold in there. You're going to want to figure a way to build your portfolio, to work out the operational kinks, to get repetitions with inquiries and site tours, to gain testimonials and social proof, to build up a portfolio, to work with new vendors. And so volume is really the name of the game. The faster you can get more events on the books, the faster you'll work through that early business stage. However, I think most people will then move into this kind of juicy middle, which is going to be the competitive pricing strategy. And that's going to be where you really want to make sure that you're kind of in the middle of your comp set, your competition, but also your comparable venues, and make sure that you're not too high or too low. I think you can be a little bit above or a little bit below, wherever, or you can be right in the middle. But you want to really keep in mind who it is that you're being compared with and make sure that you're not either extraordinarily low or extraordinarily high. There's something that takes effect. It's called the price quality effect. When people see a really low price compared to the others, they think something's wrong with that. There's low quality associated with it. However, when they see a high price compared to the others, they think, oh, that must be that much better. And that's just how humans go with their gut. Like, you're a restaurant guy. If you were working at a restaurant and you wanted to have, you wanted to sell a $12 bottle of, or $12 glass of Chardonnay on the beverage menu, you would have a $9 glass, a $12 glass, and a $16 glass. And, chances are 70% of the time, people are going to choose that middle option at $12. So it's very helpful as a competitive pricing strategy to make sure that you are really in that juicy middle because, statistically speaking, 2/3 of the people are going to choose that middle. However, if you are full on dates already and you're a seasoned business, you've been around for however many years, and your Saturdays during peak season are full, you've been kind of filling in on your shoulder season and shoulder days of the week, you might want to start implementing a premium pricing strategy where you're intentionally coming in higher than the comp set to make the most of the dates that you have. Hard to say which one is going to work best for all businesses. It's really something that's going to be specific to where you're at. And it could be season to season. Sometimes you could be busier than usual, and other times you could be slower, and you might have to switch back from one strategy to the next.
Is there a way to leverage that pricing strategy within your own venue? Because it sounds like you're talking about the pricing in context of the market. Is there a way to have that same exact strategy to provide the contrast between a lower priced option, a premium package that you might offer, maybe even if you're a blank canvas venue, offering some inclusive feeling options? But again, is there a way to leverage the psychology behind that inside the venue that you have, not just as the market as a whole?
1,000%. 1,000%. In fact, it's one of the best ways to not just book more dates, but to get more per date. And I have extensive experience with this. Not only was I the events manager for a number of years and did the event sales, but I was also the lodging director. And we had 80 rooms. We did 10,000 room nights a year. And I did that for 8 years. We had everything from a historic shared bath accommodation at $80 a night during our slow season to a 3-bedroom home with an elevator and a rooftop terrace at $1,000 a night during our peak season. And that meant that I had to understand revenue management principles. And so I went to school. I audited courses and read books that were used textbooks for revenue management programs. And then I took that and applied it to what I was doing with the venue. If it works for rooms, why wouldn't it work for a room with a wedding in it? And so I would use the same revenue management principles. It's called dynamic pricing or active yield management that airlines do and hotels use and parking lots use and movie theaters and toll roads. And that's basically this: if you have a fixed supply but a fluctuating demand, you are absolutely primed to use this dynamic pricing model. And so as demand goes up for a fixed supply, you want to increase the prices. As demand goes down for a fixed supply, you want to lower the prices to get more people in there. Now, venues are primed for success with this because venues typically have low operating costs, and the seasonal nature is there, and you can do something about it by actually moving a date that somebody has in mind. So when I was selling venues, I ran a calendar with 5 different seasons on it. So, low season, to peak season, super peak season. And I looked at, just like I did for hotel rooms, what we had done previously as a historical model on those dates. And I would look at an occupancy percentage of those dates that would then have been full historically. The higher occupancy percentage we have, the higher I jacked up the rates. The lower the occupancy percentage, the lower I would put the rates. So let's say you're full on Saturdays. I would recommend having a higher rate for Saturdays, higher than you charged in the year that you were full. And that would certainly be higher than, say, a Tuesday during low season. So there's any range of numbers that you can put in the middle, but you should probably have 3, 4, maybe even 5 different seasons on your calendar with different prices associated with the seasons. Now, I would recommend keeping everything the same as far as a service level. Whatever it is that you offer with your venue. We offered, set up and breakdown of the ceremony and the reception, tables, chairs, linens, china, glass, silver, staffing, heaters, fuel, cake cutting, dancing, all that was rolled into one. That was our venue fee. And then we charge food per person, beverage guy consumption, service fee, and tax. And so that venue fee, that's what fluctuated up and down. The food menu, always the same. The bar menu, always the same. Service fee, always the same. Tax, always the same. The inclusions in the venue, always the same. But the price went up and down based on demand. Just like if you were to go and buy a airplane ticket during busy season to Hawaii, it's going to be way more expensive than, trying to fly to Orlando right now with a hurricane impending.
Yeah, I actually rent my car, one of my cars out on Turo, and I actually specifically purchased the car to rent it out on Turo, and I've noticed when you click the automatic pricing button, they do an automatic price fluctuation. They utilize that dynamic pricing. So that's huge. When you're talking about dynamic pricing though for venues, I've seen a lot of venues that typically have 2 seasons, right? They'll say a high season and a low season, and they'll have those pricing differences. It sounds like you're talking about having a bit more, when you're saying dynamic, it's not just 2, it's 3, 4, up to 5, you said. What is the difference in price? Are you adjusting the price by $20, 200, $500? Like, what is the price adjustment when you say higher or a little bit lower based on the interest level?
So one of the things, like, let's just look at, say you had 3. I would recommend no less than 3 options because you want to use 3 for what's called the compromise effect. Where, if we had 3 microphones that we had no labels on them, but they had a price underneath them, and you didn't know any features, all you knew was the price. The studies have shown that about 25% of the people will choose the cheaper one, 70% will choose the middle option, 5% will choose the highest. Now, even though people aren't choosing the highest option, it's really important to make sure that you have that there because it operates as what's called an anchor. So in pricing strategy and tactics, an anchor is really important because we know that when you first put out something, that is the anchor. And then everything is compared to that number. So if I tell you that, tickets to Hawaii are $1,000, but we're offering them at $600 on Tuesdays, you're like, wow, I'm saving $400. That's awesome. But if I tell you that tickets are typically $600 to Hawaii, but on this date that you're looking at, they're $1,000, you're like, I'm paying $400 or 67% more. That sucks. What can I do for $600? So as a venue, what we want to make sure that we're doing is that we're using anchors effectively. And one of the most effective ways to use an anchor is to deter people from choosing only the peak dates and instead look at the shoulder season or second tier dates as the one that they're going to look at. And that's really going to be Saturdays during not your very busiest months, and also Fridays and Sundays during your very busiest months. I would recommend that pretty much every single venue owner out there who's listening to this, what you should be focused on is how can I book more Fridays and Sundays during peak season and Saturdays during shoulder season. Don't worry about trying to get any dates at all when it's either super hot or really cold or there's just no demand for whatever reason in your local market. But what you really want to focus on is how can I grow the business when the weather is the best? That's the Friday and Sunday, not just the Saturdays. And then how can I take advantage of the most desirable day of the week, Saturday, in the kind of desirable shoulder seasons? That's where growth will come from. So if you can have a peak, a shoulder, and a low season, you can then use that peak Saturday as the anchor so that the shoulder Fridays and Sundays or shoulder Saturdays look that much more appealing because they look affordable compared to the peak date.
That is huge. Sam, this is awesome. This is such a meaty podcast and show, and I really appreciate you sharing all this because, this is, like I said in the beginning, like this is the meat and potatoes of this. Like this is what I think people come to do. They have a venue because they feel like there's some passion behind it, certainly, but there's some money to be made. There's a way to leverage the real estate they have and different things like that. And so I love this. This is super powerful. And I feel like we could go on and on. I have one more question to kind of wrap this up. When you're talking about the different ways to break up the pricing, the different seasons, whether it's a shoulder season, whether it's an ideal date or not, how are you guiding the couple to maybe choose a different date that's not one of those peak ones? Because you're talking about really kind of directing and influencing those decisions to make sure that you are able to book up those shoulder dates. How are you doing that? What's that sales process like to say, hey, I know you were thinking about this, Saturday in my peak season, but we've got some of these other great dates. How are you doing that? How are you providing that adjustment?
So this was one of the big breakthroughs that I had. It was in 2007. I was then married to my first wife, and she was Argentine. And we were trying to fly back home with our baby and to Argentina to visit the motherland and her mother. And so I was looking at booking mileage tickets through American Airlines. And I remember going on to their site, and they had, I don't know if you remember this or if it's the same now, or if you ever had an experience with this, they have everything kind of color coded. And it was the darker the color, the more expensive it was, the lighter the color, the less expensive it was. And they basically showed you the whole month that you were looking at, like you click the My Dates Are Flexible button, and up pops the calendar, and it's a rate calendar. And I could see what rates were on what dates. And I would go through and I was like, well, we'd been looking at leaving on a Friday, but Thursday's 25% less. Maybe Thursday would be good. Maybe I could take a day off of work and we could leave early. Or you know what? Why don't we look at like the next week, because the rates drop by 40% the next week. I'm more flexible than I imagined now that I see it right there. So I went back to work the next day, probably like 4:00 in the morning. I mean, it was early. I was excited. And I went and I created a rate calendar for our venue. And I went through and I took a calendar. I created one on Excel. It was very rudimentary, but it was like a golden goose, Jonathan. It laid so much revenue for us over the next several years. And it still does. I know that the resort's still using it 8 years after I left. And so what you would do is you would take that normal, say, 3-season calendar that you have. And if you're like most venue owners, you list it out: low season, mid season, peak season, or the rates for even worse. This is what I see all the time. And it's so hard to read, especially for the dreamer buyers that are out there that are super visual, is you list out like April 1st through June 30th, the price on this day is this much, and this day is another amount. And then you're like, and then on July 1st to September 15th, here's a whole new thing. And it's like literally just listed out. Dump all of that instead. And this is the biggest takeaway. I'm like, this is like a golden goose for your own business. If you're listening to this, create this color coded calendar that at a glance has your 3 or 4 or 5 seasons. You also create a grayed out color, which is now you're booked. Create scarcity, which we talked about, is a late stage, sales tool that you can use. And what you'll do is you will move people on their own. They will move themselves. Everybody's going to come to you with, I want to get married on a Saturday in the peak season. But if you can show that the Saturday in the peak season is twice as much as a Friday, literally one day before it, you get all the same stuff. People are like, you know what? Maybe we could do a Friday wedding. Or maybe we could do a Sunday wedding. Or you know what? Maybe we could go a little bit earlier because I see that the Saturday in June is 20% less than the Saturday in July. Maybe that would give us the extended guest list that we want. Or we could put more money towards the food and beverage. We could host the bar. We could go to some other really great place on our honeymoon instead of, to this regional destination. So I would have people, Jonathan, like this was a game for me when I was selling. I would go through and I get somebody who's like, my lucky number is 24. We met on a Saturday. We got engaged on a Saturday. We definitely want to get married on July 24th because it's like historically the least amount of rain, for that venue location. That's the only date that we have. They tell me on the inquiry form or, on early stage discovery calls. And then they come out and they tour, and I go through, I do the whole dog and pony, and then I would give them a rate calendar and I would show them, hey, we have the 24th open, but I just want to let you know, if you're interested in moving to Friday the 23rd or Sunday the 25th, you can probably save $3,000 to $6,000 on your overall bill. And that would allow you to get all the things that I just learned that you really want, or you could pocket it and use it for a down payment on a home or, whatever it is that you want to do. And I saw so many people move. I'll end with this number, how effective it was. The first year that I worked at the resort, we had almost half of our weddings, 15 out of 30 weddings, were in the July, August time period. We were in the Northwest. We were a regional destination on an island. And so it was, those are the months that we did events. The last year that I was there, we went from 14 or 15 weddings in July and August to 60 out of 62 dates were filled in July and August, because we were using this dynamic pricing model where we had $1,000 was our venue fee, because we did in-house catering and we had lodging, but $1,000 for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then Fridays and Sundays were like $3,500 to $5,500. And then Saturdays were $9,500. So we had a really wide spectrum, much wider than what most people are doing. Most people that I know in the venue space are doing like maybe like 5 to 15, maybe 20% variance between their highest and lowest.
Yeah.
You get that, you get that Saturday, $9,500, the Friday and Sunday, the day before at $5,500 or $3,500, that looks really cheap now.
Yeah.
And so what I found is that we were able to move people to whatever date I really wanted them to go to. And the ones who wouldn't move, who really did want that Saturday, they were pre-qualified and willing to spend the money. That was amazing because we got top dollar for the date.
Yeah, and those dates are so much fewer, so to actually book those dates, like you have the opportunity to book those 30 dates or 22 dates or whatever happens to be for your specific venue. That is so powerful. Sam, thank you so much for sharing this with us. And again, I think we're gonna have you come back on the podcast and talk about this more. But if people wanna connect with you, if they wanna hear more about this side, or like we didn't even talk about the copywriting stuff that you do, and you know, there's so much more that your business does, where can people reach you if they wanna connect to you directly or your business?
Yeah, we give away so much free content. It's disgusting. My wife is always telling me, like, Sam, we give away so much free stuff. Why is anybody going to pay for our services? Here's the thing. Go and get the free stuff. It's going to help your business. When you're ready to get the good stuff, you come back and you can inquire with us. All the free stuff is out there on Instagram. So Ideaction Consulting is a great place to go. Have a podcast that I do called Own Your Business, and you can find it on any of the podcast platforms. We also have a weekly newsletter that I write, and I've done it for 6 years. We've got a lot of really good content on our website at ideactionconsulting.com, or you can subscribe to the newsletter at the bottom of the website with a name and email address. You'll only get great content, super valuable, free tidbits like you received here today.
Cool. That's huge. Sam, thank you so much for coming on. And for everyone listening, check out Sam, what he's doing over at Ideaction Consulting. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next episode.